All right, let's pull back the curtain on the internet. Today, we are going to look at the one thing that every single website you've ever visited is built on. Yep, we're talking about HTML, the language that literally gives the web its shape.
You know, when you land on your favorite site, you see all the cool colors, the slick animations, all the buttons you can click. But have you ever stopped to wonder if you stripped all that fancy stuff away, what would actually be left? What's the core foundation holding it all together?
Well, that foundation, it's called HTML. It stands for Hypertext Markup Language, and honestly, the best way to think about it is as the skeleton of a web page. It provides that essential structure, that framework that everything else, all the style, all the interactivity, gets built on top of.
So how do you even build a skeleton like this? Well, it's made up of individual bones, and in the world of HTML, we call these tags. They are the absolute fundamental building blocks of every single web page out there.
A tag is basically a command, a label that you give to the web browser. By wrapping some text in these angle brackets, you're not just writing words anymore, you're telling the browser, hey, pay attention. This bit here is a heading, or this part is a paragraph. They're the markers that define everything on the page.
Now, a really key thing to get is that tags almost always come in pairs. You have an opening tag, like this P, which tells the browser, okay, a paragraph starts right here. And then you need a closing tag, /P, with that little / to say, and the paragraph ends here. It's like putting bookends on your content.
Okay, so a tag tells us what something is. A paragraph, a heading, whatever. But what if we need to give it more specific instructions? Like, what if we want to make that paragraph a clickable link? For that, we're going to need to add a bit more detail.
And that's where attributes come in. Attributes are just extra little pieces of information that you tuck right inside the opening tag. The format's super simple. You've got the attribute's name, like href for a link, then an equal sign, and finally the value you want to give it, wrapped up in quotes. That's it.
So we've got our building blocks now, tags and attributes. Let's zoom out from looking at the individual bones and see how they come together to form the entire skeleton of a web page.
Every single HTML document is split into two main sections. First, you've got the head. Think of this as all the behind-the-scenes stuff the browser needs to know, like the little title that shows up in your browser tab. Then you've got the body, and this is the main stage. This is where all the actual content that you see and interact with lives. A skeleton is great and all, but it's not super useful just sitting there. So let's start adding two of the most essential things that really bring a web page to life: links and images. So let's look at the two big ones. To make a link, you use the A tag, that stands for anchor, and its key attribute is href, which is where you put the web address you want to link to. For an image, you use the img tag, and its most important attribute is src, which just tells the browser the source, or the location of that image file.
And that simple A tag, that's the magic of the whole web right there. It's what puts the hypertext in hypertext markup language. It's what allows us to connect billions of different pages together into this massive interconnected web of information. Pretty cool.
Now for images, there are a few other attributes that are absolutely essential. Besides source, the alt attribute is incredibly important. It gives a text description for screen readers, which makes the web accessible to everyone, and it's also what you see if the image file breaks. Then width and height do more than just set the size. They help the browsers save the right amount of space so the page doesn't jump all over the place while it's loading. So if you put that all together, a standard everyday image tag looks just like this. You've got the source file, small.jpg, and then that all-important alt text describing what the image is. Simple, clean, and effective.
But modern HTML lets us get a lot smarter. Check out the scretset attribute. This thing is a game changer. It basically lets you give the browser a whole menu of different image sizes. The browser can then look at the device you're on, whether it's a tiny phone or a giant monitor, and pick the perfect size. And what's the result? A much, much faster loading page for you.
So, we've seen how HTML gives us the structure, the skeleton. But, a skeleton by itself isn't the whole story, is it? So what comes next? What actually brings it all to life?
The thing is, HTML almost never works alone. To get those modern websites we're all used to, it teams up with two other technologies. You've got CSS, which adds all the style, the colors, the fonts, the layout. And then you have JavaScript, which adds all the interactivity, the animations, the pop-ups, all the smart stuff. So we'll leave you with this thought.
We've just explored the bones of the web with HTML. But the next step in this journey is to figure out what gives that skeleton its skin and its clothes, its style, and what gives it a brain, its smarts. And that is a story for another time.